Good evening and welcome to the regular City Council meeting for the City of Sugar Land. Tonight we're going to have the invocation and the pledge by Councilwoman Carol McCutcheon. Carol?
I invite you to join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we pause at this time to give thanks for the men and women who lead our nation, our state, and our great city. Thank you for their dedication and commitment. Thank you for our brave soldiers who protect our national interest around the world. Father, we also thank you for our first responders who faithfully watch over and protect our families and homes. Thank you for our entire city staff as they work on behalf of our citizens. As we meet now, please guide our thoughts and our words. Give us wisdom, discernment, courage, and compassion. Help us lead in a way that glorifies you and honors our citizens. It is with humility and gratitude that we make these requests. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go to the first agenda item, it's a pleasure to welcome, we have a number of Cub Scouts and Webelos in the audience. If I could get you fine young man to stand up, tell us your name, and then what badge you're working on and what troop you're in.
Chris Lee, and I'm in I'm in Pack 631.
I'm Ellie, and I'm in Pack 631.
I'm Pearson, I'm in Pack 631.
I'm Nicholas, and I'm in Pack 631.
I'm Shane, and I'm in Pack 631, and the badge we are working on is how to build a better world.
I'm Charlie Breeden, and I'm in Pack 1121.
I'm Samuel, and I'm in Pack 1121.
I'm Grant, I'm in Pack 1121.
I'm Grayson Phillips, I'm in Pack 1131.
Yeah, and if you could, no ma'am, if y'all could, you've got your moms, your dads are here, if you could, if you guys could stand. Yeah, thank y'all. Item number one is public comment. This is reserved for anybody that wants to speak on any of the agenda items that we have. It's only for those agenda items that don't have a public hearing. So if there's a public hearing on an agenda item, and I don't think we have one, you're invited to come forward at this time. State your name, your address, and what agenda item you're going to be speaking on. Thomas, I don't think we had anybody sign up. Hearing none, we're going to go ahead and move to item number 2 to review the consent agenda. Item number 3 is the consent agenda. All the items on the consent agenda are going to be taken as one item unless a council member wants to pull an item. Tonight I'm going to pull item number 3J. So if we don't have any other items that we'll pull, council members, then we'll go ahead and take action on everything but 3J, and then we'll come back to 3J.
Move to approve.
Second, set 3J.
Okay, I've got a motion by Mitchell, second by McCutcheon. Any discussion? You vote at this time, please. And it passes by a vote of 6-0. Councilmember Gandhi is not with us tonight. We're going to now move to item number J, 3J, consideration of an action on rejection of a bid, ITB 2018-18 for Cullinan Park Aerobic Treatments Unit System, and William Hajdik with our Assistant Director of Parks and Rec. And William, the reason I pulled it was just so you could explain a little bit about what we're doing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The ATU bid documents for Cullinan Park restroom that's currently under Wallace Construction, that's being built with y'all's approval under buy board contract, is being built right now by Wallace, and the subfloor subgrade has been installed, and my understanding is the contractor is building the restroom off-site and going to install it. The restroom will need disposal of the waste. So with that, the ATU system package documents were sent out to bid and advertisement on end of December and beginning of January. We received one bid back that was significantly over the engineer's estimate and our budget for this project. We believe that bidding at and near the holiday season was a possible reason why we only received one bid back from Triad Construction. We did review the one bid with the Cullinan Park Conservancy, and they were in agreement with our recommendation that we reject the bid with City Council approval, and that we go back out to bid, possibly specifying an alternate product or vendor ATU system. With approval of this action, staff would immediately work with the engineer, WGA, and purchasing to revise the scope of services, alternate products, and go back out to bid.
And William, the reason it's important is Cullinan is actually paying for this, so it's
Yes,
not
sir.
something the city of Sugar Land's paying for. It happens to be a park that we don't even own the park. City of Houston owns the park. Cullinan Conservancy, they're the ones that provide the CIP dollars. We operate the park, and we provide security.
Yes, sir.
Questions? Amy?
Mentioned that there was only one bid and it was significantly above the budget amount. What was the budgeted amount and what was the bid?
Good question.
Thank you.
It was, let's see, the bid came back with the alternates at $221,890, and our budget was around $145,000.
Thank you.
Well,
Anyone else? I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Any other discussion? Vote at this time, please.
thank you.
Thanks, William. And it passes a vote of 6-0. We're going to go ahead and move to item number 5. Item number 4 is audited financial statements. Our auditor is stuck in traffic right now, so we're going to skip that item and we're going to move to item number 5, budget. 5A, first and final consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land ordinance number 2152. An ordinance of the City of Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, amending the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget for the City of Sugar Land, Texas, to provide that the revised budget address funds relating to certain capital and operating budget matters, and that this amendment be adopted as the budgeted amount for those funds. We've got Ms. Jennifer Brown, our Director of Finance, and Cynthia Rushing, our Budget Manager.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take this item with the timing. Cynthia wasn't quite down here yet, and of course Chris walked in right as I started, so I get dibs. I'm already up here.
You almost got here, Chris.
Sorry, Chris, you were about 30 seconds too late. So each year, as we go through the budget process, City Council appropriates funding to support the operations of the city. And the city's fiscal year ends on September 30th of each year. And so the operating budget is from October 1 to September 30th, and the capital program extends for the length of the project. Sometimes when we have some one-time funding for projects, the activities actually go beyond the end of the fiscal year. So as of September 30th, they may or may not be complete. So when we need to continue those projects into the current fiscal year, we need to reappropriate those funds. And so we refer to those reappropriations as carryovers. We typically will come to you 3 to 4 months after the end of the fiscal year and ask you to reallocate those funds in the current year budget. Additionally, after we start the beginning of the fiscal year, Council may approve other budget amendments to the budget, and those are also referred to as appropriations. Under state law, all budget amendments have to be formalized in the same manner that we adopt the budget, which is by ordinance. And so, excuse me, typically we will just ask you to approve budget amendments throughout the year, and then we will combine them all into a couple of ordinances during the year, so that we're not bringing a budget ordinance to you essentially every single meeting as we're accepting grants and things like that. So what you'll see is part of this item is that we'll have both carryovers and capturing budget amendments that we've done since October 1. Now, the proactive budget management that the city has allowed the city to end the year better than anticipated. And I anticipated this being after the audit, so some of these numbers will reference back to audited numbers. But because we ended the year better than anticipated, this allows us to have the funding to be able to do things like carry over the funds and continue these projects that we had ongoing. As we're projecting revenues, it's a continuous process. We are making adjustments to revenues and expenditures during the year. We do mid-year projections as part of the budget process. Hello, Cynthia. So we have a better idea of how we're going to end the year. So it's not a one and done on the budget. We're constantly monitoring this. And so through this conservative approach, and it's a very strategic approach of our city's financial management, we have our policy statements guiding us. That helps us to reinforce our financial stability, and that's what has helped earn us that AAA bond rating, is the foresight that we have on the city's financial management. The rating agencies have very strong assurances that we'll be able to maintain that financial health. All right. What I'd like to do at this point, since Cynthia has made it down, I want to introduce her real quick. Cynthia is our new budget manager. She joined us about 3 months ago. And so I'm going to let her run through the numbers, and then I will be here, since she kind of wasn't here during fiscal year 18, I'll be here to answer questions if you ask her something that I didn't anticipate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn over the rest of the presentation to her.
Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so this is how we finished up the year in our major operating funds. The headline here is that we finished better than anticipated. As you can see, in the general fund, the budgeted ending balance is $24 million, compared to the actual ending balance of $27.6 million, resulting in an extra fund balance of $3.4 million, which is due primarily to savings from expenditures and one-time sales tax revenue over budget. Similarly, in the extra fund balance for utility funds, we finished up with $3 million, and that is due primarily to savings from expenditures as well. In airport, the extra fund balance is a $1.2 million, and that's primarily due to higher fuel sales. Now, the next two slides are all the carryovers for one-time expenditures and revenue by fund. The extra fund balance is the increase in the fund balance at the end of FY18. In the general fund balance, the extra fund balance is $3.4 million, with one-time expenditures of $844,000, one-time revenue of $10,000, for a net carryover value in the general fund of $833,000. While I will not read through all of the items on the slide, I would like to point out that in the debt reduction funds for Greatwood and New Territory, that these funds ended up the year better than planned. The total available in these funds totaled $300,000, and in accordance with the strategic partnership agreement, we will transfer this balance to support the debt payment for debt we assumed from the districts upon annexation. These are all the general fund carryovers by department. As you can see in the E&S facilities, $283,000 has the greatest line share of the total, which is primarily due to the Harvey-related expenditures, along with engineering for drainage studies. Carries over on the next slide. For a total of one-time expenditures of $844,000. These are all the carryovers for the utility fund that total $984,000 for asset management program, the water waste master plan, the integrated water resources plan, and GIS update. This table shows how we finished up the year in the major operating funds after all the carryovers have been applied. Even after all the carryovers, we still have $2.5 million in the general fund, $2 million in the utility fund, and $1.1 million in the airport fund. These funds are available for one-time use and will be discussed in context of one-time funding needs at the next spring retreat. This portion of the presentation is to formalize the previously approved budget amendments. As Jennifer mentioned, our financial policy requires an ordinance to amend the budget. In order to streamline the process, we have combined the one-time expenditures request with the previously approved budget amendments so that we come before you semi-annually versus several times throughout the year. We've had several budget amendments since October 1st. There were 3 previously approved budget amendments in the general fund, which all are supported by grant funds. These are the budget amendments for capital projects that were previously approved by council. We issued 3 bonds in FY19, which was approved on December 4th. Only the revenue bonds and GO refunding bonds need a budget amendment since they are captured in the operating funds. The CO bond is budgeted in the CIP and does not need a budget amendment. In closing, we reviewed the carryovers and budget amendments with the Finance Audit Committee on February 14th. We will require approval for carryovers for the corporations 4A and 4B at a future date after board approval. So at this time, staff is requesting the approval of the first and final reading of Ordinance 2152 to amend FY19 operating and CIP budget.
Thank you, Cynthia. Would somebody from Finance and Audit like to weigh in?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we had a detailed review of this this proposal. Cynthia did a good job walking us through it and explaining all the questions we had, and we support this amendment.
Any clarifying questions for staff? Amy?
I just want to clarify. It sounds like we were off by about $7.5 million in extra money, basically. Am I getting that right? And that sounds like a very large number to be off by. And how did that happen?
So
it may be you, it may be Jennifer, because she said she's familiar with 2018. So that's why I was not ignoring you. It's just she had said, I'm doing 2018.
Again, Cynthia wasn't here in fiscal year 18, so I don't mind stepping in. The majority of the excess fund balance is coming in the general fund. Is coming from one-time sales tax that we received during fiscal year 18 that we had not budgeted for. We received about $2.4 million in one-time sales tax. And then it also is a reflection of the savings that we achieved during the year by managing the budget. In the utility fund, we had a lot of unknowns going into annexation with the increase. We had 10,000 additional households that were brought onto the utility system. We renegotiated the wastewater treatment contract and consolidating that. So we're capturing the savings from that. And so that's really the big driver behind the utility fund. And then the airport fund is primarily, it's just fuel sales. And they actually had an increase in fuel sales. And so it's a very good thing, both in the utility and enterprise funds, because those funds are both run by like a business. And so we want to see a positive increase there.
No, I'm all for not spending money we don't have to spend, and it's always fun when you've got more money at the end. I was just trying to figure out how we were off by that much. Now, the one-time sales tax, when did we get that?
Throughout the year. And this is in the context of a $90 million budget. So, I mean, it's
2.4 out of 90 million.
Out of 90 million. And it is one-time money. It's not something that we're going to see on a recurring basis, which is why we have the policy addressing the use of one-time funds. And we'll have some discussion at the spring retreat about some priorities that have come up for potential allocation of those funds where we have needs.
So in simple English, during the spring retreat, we're going to discuss, since we have those funds of 2.4, how we can best spend that money for the citizens of our community.
Or if we should use it, or if we should hold on to it for next fiscal year.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, when you look at it across all funds, so not just the general fund, but the enterprise fund, which includes the airport, you got a $237 million budget. $237 million budget's pretty good. So you've got, you got plus or minus, 3%. That's pretty good when you look across all funds. Oh, no. I just wanted
position we want to be in.
I just wanted to make sure we kept it in the context of the total budget. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a clarifying question as well? We budgeted some of last year's one-time money in the current for fiscal year 19. This is funds that is above and beyond what we estimated when we put together the budget last summer.
Yes.
So we had some very good months during the summertime, and those dollars came in above and beyond what was our best estimate when we were working on the budget. And then the second point having to do with expenditure savings is how much is the general fund budget?
90 million. 92 million this year.
Okay, so if we're $2 million, if we're $1 million savings, it's 1%.
1% roughly.
So when you get to that close, it's a question of which side of the line do you want to be on?
Yes.
The budget office and our staff do a great job of making sure we're always on the black side. And so this is really good news for our city, and want to thank the excellent work of the Finance Department. Thank you.
Our next item will confirm that as well when you hear from our auditors.
And I'm all for it. I think this is great. Just wanted clarification. And you've done a great job. And that was part of the reason I said, when do we get it? Because I was trying to establish a lot of it comes after you do the budget, so you don't even know what's going to come in. And that's really where I was going with that question of when do we receive it. Thank you for picking up on that and answering it.
Got a motion by Councilmember Young, second by Mitchell. Any other questions? Vote at this time, please. And it's a 6-0 vote. Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Cynthia. Now we're going to go back up to item number 4, audited financial statement. 4A, receive for filing the audited comprehensive annual financial report and auditor's opinion for the fiscal year ended September 30th of 2018. And we have our own Al Kashar, our controller, and the Honorable Christopher Breaux, the CPA with Whitley Penn.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I am happy to report to you that fiscal year 18 is officially closed. Whitley Penn, the city's external audit firm, has also completed the state-required financial audit and prepared the annual financial report called CAFR. We met with the Finance Audit Committee on February the 14th to review the audit results and to go over some key financial statements. Mr. Breaux is here to present the audit. And before I turn over to Mr. Breaux, if you don't mind, I would like to thank my staff for their hard work during the year.
And Alka, why don't you ask your staff to please stand?
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Mr. City Manager. I'd like to go over the results of the audit this year. The document that Ms. Shaw referred to as the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is 164 pages long. We did go over it in some detail, not quite that much detail with the Audit and Finance Committee, but we did go over in some detail. I'm going to hit the highlights so you can get on with your business tonight. In front of you or on your screen is the engagement team this year of the folks that worked on the audit. Our approach to the audit is a risk-based approach. It's a team approach, active participation at all levels from partner to staff. We have a lot of communication with the staff during the year. Your staff, communications is frequent, both formal and informal. The goal of the audit is to lead to an opinion on the financial statements. This is a graphic explaining what leads up to that opinion. There's planning and risk assessment where we take a look at the different areas of the city, the different operations and areas that we're going to audit, assess the risk of things going wrong there. We will test controls in your system. Then we'll perform substantive tests of details and actually look, if you will, put our finger in the dike. We'll take a look at the actual backup for information that is available. Again, our purpose is to express an opinion on the report. There's three types. You can have an unmodified opinion, which is a clean report. A modified opinion, financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects except for, and then a disclaimer, which is what definitely you do not want. The auditor cannot express an opinion on the financial statements. You have received an unmodified opinion or clean opinion on the financial statements with no internal control findings related to financial reporting and no findings related to compliance. The unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance we can give on financial statements. From the single audit perspective, the federal programs, you had one major program this year, which was the highway planning and construction at the Department of Transportation. You had an unmodified opinion over that federal program, and you had no internal control findings related to the major program. In our required communications, it sounds rather formal, but these are the things we'd like to tell you that maybe the opinion doesn't tell you. The responsibility for these financial statements are yours as management. Our responsibility is to provide reasonable rather than absolute assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. As part of our audit, we obtain an understanding of the internal controls sufficient to plan our audits and determine the nature and extent of the testing to be performed. And under the governmental auditing standards, we actually test the internal controls. Your judgments, accounting estimates made by your staff, listed a few of them here. Allowance for doubtful accounts, estimated lives of capital assets, net pension and net OPEB, other post-employment benefit liabilities, deferred outflows and inflows, and the expenses that are related to that. I always like to say in financial statements, not every number is backed by an invoice. And so there are some estimates that are made to come up with the financial statement. You spoke about the budget of $200 million budget. There are some estimates that are being made even in the financial statements. And we feel that the staff has and management has appropriate backup for their estimates. We've noted no misstatements in the financial statements that we were auditing. We had no disagreements with management. We're unaware of any situations where management consulted with other accountants on accounting and financial matters, so we were unaware of any opinion shopping, if you will, that might have gone on. We do discuss matters with management periodically during the year when financial issues come up. I get calls from the accounting staff and finance staff, and we trade ideas on the way things should be handled. We don't believe that our response to those questions were the reason for us to be retained. So again, not opinion shopping with us. If we felt that had happened, we'd have told you about it. Your significant accounting policies are appropriate and in accordance with industry standards. So you're keeping track of things the way you should and the way everyone else in the industry does. So your financial statements are comparable, going back and forth. The exciting things that happened, some of the exciting things that happened this year, one was the Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, statement number 75, which brought in post-employment benefits, OPEB is what we like to call that, other post-employment benefits, and that's health care, your blended health care rate that you afford retirees to pay the same amount. They pay the full premium, but they pay the premium that you pay for the active employees. And so you have old people like me paying the same things that 25-year-olds pay. That's an implied that is an implied subsidy, and that goes on as a very similar to a pension expense. You also had GASB 69 that came into play with the annexation of Great Wood and New Territories and the dissolution of the 9 MUDs. And so in your financial statements, in the old days when you would annex a entity in mid-November, we'd pick up everything starting in November and start rolling forward. Well, under GASB 69, it's as if it's a combining, much similar to a combining of a business type organization. So the operations of the municipal utility districts from October 1 through December 12th, I believe is the date, all that is pulled into your financial statement. So some of the numbers will look a little different than how you started the year.
Chris, I'm going to stop you for a minute.
Yes, sir.
You know, there was a point in time where there were some allegations made about projections that were made about the annexation. And this audit now closes the door, and basically after closing the fiscal year and with these statements, it basically says that all that hoopla about those numbers were completely ill-conceived and unfounded. Is that correct?
Well, other than the term hoopla, yes, sir. Well, let me back up. The financial statements show that pretty much what your projections showed.
That's the point.
Yes, sir.
Right.
These items are further discussed in Note 1 and Note 16 to the financial statements. So let's go to the government-wide financial statement, statement of net position. This is everything you own versus everything you owe. Unlike your general fund, when you're looking at that, when you just have current assets and current liabilities, we have long-term assets. We have things like buildings, streets, roads, everything, infrastructure. We also have the long-term debt that is associated with that. So as we go over here, and I won't read all the numbers here, but this is a comparison year to year. Your cash and investments were $147 million versus $173 million last year. Your receivables about $3 million more at $26 million. Your capital assets, net of accumulated depreciation, is $1 trillion. I think you crossed that mark last year, and you continue to grow in that area. So your total assets are $1.2 million. You have total deferred outflows of resources. Let me just point out the outflows of resources and the inflows of resources are, if you will, counterbalances to your net pension and your net OPEB liabilities. It's a method of getting the expense right over time. Complex, but you think of the deferred outflows as assets and the deferred inflows as liabilities. Your current liabilities were at $19 million this year. Long-term debt and other liabilities is $524 million, very similar to last year. So your net position grew from $667 million to $711 million. Your non-current liabilities that we talked about, $524 million, here's what that's made up of. $121 million in certificates of obligation, $145 in revenue bonds, general obligation bonds of $190 million, premiums and discounts of $32 million, net pension liability of $21 million, and net OPEB liability of $5.6 million. And that's showing a blank last year because that was not reported in the financial statements. You had other items which were accrued compensated absence of about $7.2 million, for a total of $524 million, very similar to what you have in the previous year. On your business type activities, this is combining all the business type activities, utilities, airports, surface water, et cetera. Your total operating revenues are $73 million, with operating expenses of $74 million, gave you an operating loss of $725,000. In that operating expenses is, I'm going to look at a number real quick here. there's depreciation, and I'll get to that depreciation in just a minute of what that number was, but the large number in there. So you had non-operating expenses of $8.8 million, which is primarily interest expense. Transfers out of $3.2 million, and you have a special item in there. And that special item in there were items from the municipal utility districts post October 1 and pre-December 12th. There's $2.4 million, which was laid out by the municipal utility districts, which are not related to MUD activity, water and sewer activities. These were things that went to levy improvement districts. They went to homeowners association at the discretion of the board. But that's a special item that's unusual and frequent within management's control. We thought we would break that out so it wouldn't disrupt the operating expenses and revenue ratios there. So you had a change in net position of $2.8 million. Your beginning net position last year was reported at $281 million. The prior period adjustment of $30 million was all of those assets, net assets, assets less liabilities that were placed on your financial statements as of October 1 of 2017, leaving you an ending net position in the business type activity of $309 million. The general fund, your main operating fund here, had total revenues. We talked about $90 million, $85 million in total revenues, $86 million in total expenditures. You had transfers in of $6.5 million. So you get a net change in fund balance of $5.9 million, ending up with the fund balance of $35 million. Your revenues for the year, as you would expect, 47% is sales tax, 27% is property tax. The next largest number in your general fund is charges for services. Your revenues went from $80 million in 2017 to $85 million in 2018. This is your unassigned fund balance. It's a percentage of general fund expenditures for the last 11 years. And this number is going to be a little bit higher than what you see in budget time, I believe, because of some accruals for sales taxes such that are included in the GAAP-based financial statements. Back to that number that was $74 million in expenses in the business type activities, $23 million of that was depreciation expenses. So you're at 40% of annual general fund expenditures in your fund balance. There's unassigned fund balance, and that's a very healthy fund balance. Everything was brought to the Finance and Audit Committee, as explained earlier. And that happened on February 14th, I think right before the budget information. So at this point, I'll turn it over to any questions that you might have.
Carol?
Yes, I'm on the Finance Audit Committee, and as Chris said, this was reviewed in some detail with our committee last week in a special meeting. All of our questions were satisfactorily answered, and we were very pleased that it's an unmodified opinion, a clean report, which is the highest category that you can receive. And the committee is happy to recommend that we receive the CAFR and auditor's opinion for filing.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciated your report in our committee meeting, and I was very glad to hear with the transition for the annexation of Braidwood and New Territory was a very efficient, transparent, and legitimate process. I have a very high level of respect for our finance department at the City of Sugar Land, and I was very glad to know that they did a very good job. Thank you.
Anyone else? Bridget.
Do you mind going back to the debt page? I just want to clarify it for the public, really, because it looks, like.
I bet I can.
Okay.
Piece of paper. I bet with Alka here I can do it.
You want the debt?
That one, no. Okay, so obviously we end up very similar, but if we look at certificates of obligation, those basically drop by 100,000, whereas general obligations increased by, $100 million. So could we have that explained for the public? Because when they look at that, they're going to wonder, what the heck went on there?
That's a great example. I'm going to explain it, and then Jennifer's going to jump up here if I do it wrong. But essentially, you refinanced.
Exactly.
You refinanced the certificates of obligation that you had last year.
Mm-hmm.
And in Texas, I was going to say under Texas law, but I'm not practicing law in the state of Texas without a license. But I do know that to refinance certificates of obligation, they have to be recast as general obligation bonds. So that's, if you see that variance, that's, and I should have pointed that out, it's about $90 million decrease and about $100 million increase in your general
And I want to make sure that the public understands that issue right
Yes.
there, because it's pretty glaring.
Good point.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment. Some of our residents may be wondering why we hold such high fund balances. There have been times in the past when our sales tax went south. There have been times in the past when we had emergencies, we had to fund money. Our city manager and his financial staff recommend levels that maintain the financial resiliency of our city in the face of potential catastrophes and other things. And I think it's prudent that we do that.
Thank you. Amy?
You were just looking at with Councilmember Young? Just curious, and maybe you can explain the pensions, because the pension liability went down 12 million, more than 12 million, almost $13 million.
Yes.
How?
How did that happen? Well, there's a number of ways that can happen. What you're primarily looking at is the date of measurement. I'm not going to try to get too auditor for you here, but the date of measurement for your September 30, 2018 financial statements is using the net pension liability as of December 31st, 2017. So there's a 9-month lag. TMRS is doing one set of financial statements, and you grab whatever falls into your
So then the one from September 2017 was from December of 2016. But I still don't understand the huge.
And so what happens, so net pension liability is total pension liability offset by the net position of your trust that holds money for your pension, because it's the money that's set up there, okay? You're fairly well funded, you're very well funded, and so little changes in that will make so you've got these two icebergs that are floating like this. And all we're talking about is this little difference here. It's like one of those pie charts that have something that went from 100,000 to 101,000, and they show it real small, so it looks real big. So you've got a total pension liability, and you've got a net position that's offset there. What we don't remember is that number comes from December 31st, 2016. And if you remember what the market did in 2016, I still remember that, it dropped precipitously towards the end of the year, and it went back up in 17, from 15 to 16 to 17. That's why you have that increase in those numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Because it's 30% difference.
It is 30%, but if you think about it, you're looking at, I make up numbers here, but you're looking at 130 million and 100 million.
But it relates to market shifts, and that we had the big downturn, and we've now made up for it.
Right. So last year, this would have been it would have been flip-flopped.
Thank you.
That's right. You're welcome. That's
pension,
a great question.
it seemed like people's pension should be pretty stagnant unless we're paying it all out or something. And
That is correct, and this is primarily going to be an investment issue.
thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Alka.
Mayor, if I could thank the staff again for the great work that they do. It's not easy having auditors come in and crawl all over your offices and basically disturb you, but they did a good job of getting us this information. You've got a lot of information at the City of Sugar Land. You've got a lot of moving parts, and it is a tribute to your staff to be able to pull in the information that we need to audit and do our jobs. And I'm really appreciative. Our staff is appreciative of your staff's work. So
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Alka. No, there's no action. Item number 6, donation. 6A, consideration of an action on acceptance of a donation of 150 ZOLL life bands valued at $17,700 from the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council to the Sugar Land Fire EMS Department. We've got our own Fire Chief, Doug Boker. Doug, what's going on?
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Mr. Bogard, welcome back. I'm disappointed to see the Boy Scouts leaving because this is like more exciting than the audit. So your fire EMS department is always looking for cost-effective ways to run our department, and this is just such a case tonight. We're a member agency for the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council, or SETRAC, and we've arranged a donation possibility through SETRAC where they'll give us 150 life bands that we use with a device called an AutoPulse that we carry on each of our ambulances. This is a compression device during CPR for patients who are pulseless, and it frees up our personnel to do other life-saving skills. This donation is valued at roughly $17,000, and last year we used 86 of these bands. We used roughly 90 a year, so this will give us about a year and a half supply. So with that, I guess that's the slide I was just speaking on. I'm sorry. And with that, then staff recommends that council will approve the donation from SETRAC for the 150 ZOLL life bands valued at $17,700.
Thank you, Doug. Amy?
With that, I can answer any questions you might have.
AED.
It's a completely separate device. An AED is an electrical device that kind of shocks the heart to do what we want it to do. This it replaces somebody doing manual CPR. So where we would otherwise have a member of our fire department doing chest compressions, this is a band that goes around the pulseless apneic patient and compresses the heart to keep the blood flowing, and that frees up that person for us.
Okay, and it's only a one-time use?
These are single-use devices, and they're loaded onto the AED prior to the call. So every morning, the crew will check, and there's a life band onto the AutoPulse device on each ambulance, and it Velcros open. We place a patient on the device, we close it with Velcro, and it goes to work.
And they're $118 each?
They are, and that's why it makes this such a great donation for us.
This is wonderful, and thank you so much for both saving the city money as well as protecting the safety of our citizens. This is great, and I'd like to move to approve.
Second.
Yes, Bridget.
Explain who the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council is.
So each area has a RAC, a Regional Advisory Council, that's mandated by the state, and our involvement with a RAC is mandated. That's how we get our matching funds. Typically, our participation is limited to going to the meetings and reporting our call data, and that's how the state assesses the value provided to EMS provision and funds that activity at the state level.
It's a very nice donation, so we thank them.
Got a motion, I've got a second. If you vote at this time, please. And it passes 6-0. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Item number 7, ordinances and resolutions. 7A, consideration of and action on City of Sugar Land Resolution number 1904. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, establishing the roles and responsibilities of the City HOA Maintenance Responsibilities Citizen Task Force. We have our own Eric Oscarson, our Assistant Director of Public Works. Eric.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Before you tonight is a resolution to establish roles and responsibilities for the task force, and this is to establish the task force. Just a reminder, just last month, staff presented an update on the City HOA Maintenance Responsibilities Task Force. And during that meeting, Council concurred that the Finance and Audit Committee would be the Council representation for this task force, and also concurred that there's a need for a citizen task force. Resolution 15-24 of the City Council policy governs the procedures for boards, commission, and committees, and that includes task force. And that policy states that council is responsible for the appointment process of citizen task force, and also that a resolution must be approved to create a task force. In that resolution, we need to spell out the responsibilities. This is the responsibilities for the City HOA Task Force. They're going to participate in community dialogue and education process regarding the City HOA maintenance concerns and to attend public roundtable discussions. They're going to help identify any gaps in service relating to the public and private infrastructure. They're going to review current policies, provide input and direction on policy and ordinance changes, and they're going to advocate for those changes. Not included in the resolution, but something to discuss tonight, is the representation of the task force. At the last meeting, we discussed a 13-member task force. We met back with Finance Audit and reviewed a couple options for how we would represent the task force. Coming out of that Finance Audit meeting, there was a recommendation to have a task force of 15 members. 7 members will be made up of HOA board members or executive directors. Again, being a citizen task force, they must be residents. 8 members will be non-HOA board members or executive directors. In other words, general residents, general citizens. The chair will be selected by the task force members. And then what we'll do moving forward is on February 20th, tomorrow, we'll take that application online. We have an extensive communication plan, that will notify residents through social media, the website, emails directly to HOAs, in different formats to make sure we get it out, that the application's available. We're going to have 2 optional informational meetings for any applicants that are interested, where we will review what the task force is going to be about, what the time commitment is, because this is a long time commitment for this, a 12 to 18-month project, and go over different things and allow them to answer some questions. It'll be out on the street for about 3 weeks. From then, we will present those applications to the Finance and Audit Committee for review. And on the March 21st Finance Audit Committee, the intent is to review those applications and get a I lost my train of thought. Get a concurrence, from the Finance Audit Committee on what their recommendation is. And then on April 16th, this will come back to City Council, and City Council has to pass a resolution to create that task force. And with that, staff is recommending approval of Resolution 19-04, which establishes the roles and responsibilities of the City HOA Maintenance Responsibilities Task Force. And I'll take any questions.
So if, just a reminder to council, if clarifying questions of staff, if there's something that staff can answer, if not, those questions should be directed at ourselves, and Oscar will sit down. Questions? Amy?
Was there any discussion, the HOAs vary in size. First Colony's huge, Sugarwood not so huge. Sure. So was there discussion of how many members from a particular HOA, because I think there's 6 or 7, I guess there's maybe 7 board members on FCCA, so conceivably you could have all 7 people be from one HOA. So was there any discussion on spreading the wealth and ensuring that different HOAs are represented?
Yeah. So one of the things we presented to Finance Audit was we put together a table of all the residential parcels throughout the city, over 40,000 residential parcels, and we broke it down into groups so we understand what an HOA like FCCA or New Territory or Greatwood would have in size compared to a Sugarwood, a Sugar Mill, a Ganaway Lakes. And so we put it into different sections, and it's color-coded. It was color-coded for Finance Audit to review, and we were able to come up with, if we were to break it down and say, right, 100% of all the HOA residential parcels, and we were to break it down into 7, divided by 7, it's about 14 to 15%, right? Between there would be residential population we need to cover. So what we did was our recommendation was that when you have a Greatwood and New Territory, a First Colony, that they would each have a representative available to them, but they only get one. Each one of those represent about 15% of the population of the city of Sugar Land that live in HOAs. So the recommendation to them was pick one from these different areas. You can't have more than one from one single HOA. So you can't overload it with FCCA. And then when you have those 7 that are board members, the other 8 that are non-board members, our recommendation was to choose them from other HOAs. They could live in other HOAs in an attempt to have 15 members that really do cover the whole city and is a diverse a diverse segment of the population, and it covers as much as we could.
I think that's great. Does the ordinance say that, or is that just the discussion you had?
No, the discussion we had, so the resolution isn't required to state that. It was, again, we have to leave it, that's the direction we're going. We don't know who's going to apply. So we have to look at the applications and look at what it's going to, who applies and how we can fit that into what our recommendation is.
So this be the equivalent of legislative notes, what they were thinking when they did it. Okay, then the next question I had was, is there any length of time that somebody serving on this task force should have lived in the city? They could have moved here 3 days ago. So do we say, well, you got to live here at least X amount of time, or it didn't matter?
The application is open to anybody that is a resident of Sugar Land.
And was there a discussion about how often it would be meeting? You talked about it being 18 months, but
Yeah, it's about, when I presented it last time, we talked about it would be 12 to 18 months and then be a monthly meeting, once a month.
Okay, well, I applaud this. I was just trying to figure out those parameters with it. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Carol?
Just wanted to mention that we also would have 2 alternates due to the length of time that we anticipate the Citizen Task Force to be in effect.
Well, any more questions for Oscar? One more. Go ahead.
No worries.
How are you going to communicate to what's your method of communicating to everybody that this task force is being created? So how are we going to get maximum involvement from the community?
So community engagement has put together a social media communication plan. We are going to be sending out emails to directors of the HOAs, board members of the HOAs. We're going to be hitting up all of our different social media platforms. It's going to be on the website. We have a press release going out tomorrow. So we're trying to hit up all of the options we have to communicate out to the public. We are going to be using them.
Thank you.
Oscar, you can go ahead and sit down. Any additional thoughts from Finance and Audit, Steve?
Yes, Mayor. We had quite a discussion about how we would allocate the representatives. Kudos to Eric for coming up with a quasi-scientific approach. Very much appreciated. We're very excited about this process. We're going to be the council subcommittee on this. And I think it's a timely thing to do. So I would encourage us to approve it.
Is that a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion by Porter, second by Mitchell. Any other discussion? Bridget?
So the way I understand it is we'll receive the applications, the finance audit will review the applications, and you will select the applicants, and then you're going to bring that forward to...
As a recommendation.
As a recommendation. Okay.
So there will not, sorry.
Yeah.
So the rest of council who's not on finance and audit will have no say in who's on this committee. It just at the very end
We'll
after.
give you a recommendation, but you have the final approval.
Okay, will we see everybody who's applied, or is it only going to go through finance and audit? We see the end
You'll
result.
see our recommendation about how to populate the committee.
I think that's the reason for going through the committee is because you're going to get, they're going to actually do the yeoman's work, if you will, bring back a recommendation. We'll talk about the recommendation. We're not going to rehash what they've already gone through.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Right.
If I understand what you're saying is, say you have 20 people apply for 15 positions, y'all will hone it down to the 15.
Yes.
And then just come to us. Are we going to see the people who are not included? I would like to see at least the names of everybody who applies, and that because I think it's important we all see that. And but you hashing it out is okay. But if we have a strong opinion and we don't know who the other people are, it leaves us with no options.
My sense is that everything that comes before council, we get to see on Friday before Tuesday. So you'll see all that and you can see anything you want to see anytime you want to see it.
Just making sure. It's a communication thing, because sometimes we see them and all it says is this is the end result, and it doesn't say all these people applied.
That will be what you see when there's a motion on the floor. Here's 15 people that we recommend, and there's always no bashful about amending things if you don't like our list.
Well, I think I was clear. Just let us know everybody who applied, and then you can come with your final recommended list.
There's no reason why you can't see all that.
Thank you.
I've got a motion, I've got a second. If you'll vote at this time, please. And it's a 6-0 vote. Thank you. Item number 8, our workshop. 8A, review of and discussion on the Integrated Water Resource Plan Workshop number 1. Our own Katie Clayton, the Water Resources Manager, the first of 3.
Yes, the first of 3.
Katie.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm excited to be in front of you this evening. Like the mayor said, the first of 3 presentations sharing the details of the last 4 years of work that the city has been undergoing, planning water supplies for future needs. The agenda that I have for you this evening is intended to answer the question why for this plan. And I have 3 questions that I hope that you walk away from understanding. The first one is why the city is completing a water supply effort. The second one is for you to understand why the city chose to leave the traditional approach for water supplies and to look at an integrated approach. And the third one kind of dives into the details of an integrated water resource plan, outlining the objectives. And the objectives, in its simplest definition, is why are water supplies important to our community, and what is that goal, those community goals and visions with regards to future water supplies. I'll start out this evening with a brief introduction. The city began thinking about this planning effort back in 2015, doing a lot of research, looking at how other cities take on water supply efforts, and really trying to wrap our heads around what success looks like for the city. And as we were working through that process, we recognized that it's important and critical for us to not only include city staff and consultants, but also to include our community in this plan. And we achieved this through the formation of 2 task forces. We formed both a council task force and a citizen task force. You can see there the number of meetings and time that we spent with them throughout this process. We really asked for them to give us that community input and asked for a significant amount of time. Throughout this process, they've walked hand in hand with us step by step. And I think it's really created, as you'll see over the next couple workshops, created a successful plan for the city. I'll start out with talking briefly about our council task force. They were appointed back in August of 2016, and like you saw in the previous slide, they've met with us 25 times since then. Council members Porter, Council member Gandhi, and former Council member Jaju were part of this task force, and we outlined specific responsibilities for them throughout the process, providing us feedback kind of every step of the way. And I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Porter at this point to maybe say a few words about his involvement in the plan. Keep going? Okay, absolutely. I also want to recognize the Citizen Task Force that has stepped with us through this process, made up of 13 members and 1 alternate. And this evening, they were appointed in March of 2017. This evening, Tricia Frederick is here with us, as well as a couple other members of our Citizen Task Force, and I'll let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about who the task force represented, some of their backgrounds, and their responsibility.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. Hello. And council members. My name is Tricia Frederick, and I was very honored to serve on the Citizen Task Force, and I was very fortunate to have met and worked with the other 13 members that make up this very diverse group. If you look at this map here, each star represents a task force member and where they live. So you can see that each of the 4 council districts were represented. I'm a resident of Greatwood, and we also had representation from New Territory. So the newly annexed areas were included and represented. Luckily, they only allowed 3 engineers on the task force, and I'm one of them. But we do have other members working in different industries, from marketing, finance, and the arts. We had an HEB manager, a gentleman that works for the EPA. We had retirees. So it was a wonderful cross-section of our community. So the process to be part of the task force, we started a couple years ago. We filled out applications, we attended informational, and then there's a selection process, first by the Public Works Group and then by City Council. Our responsibilities since then has been a monthly meeting. It would last about an hour and a half or so. We helped develop the objective weights. We provided feedback on the projects and options, and also provided feedback on the final framework. I'm going to turn it back over to Katie.
Tricia, could you have, I think we've got some of those members in the audience. Could you all please stand and be recognized? You know, when you look at it, that's an extraordinary commitment that you made to our city, to your city, and we really appreciate your service. Steve, you and Himesh, I know Himesh is not here. Of course, Harish not here either, but we appreciate the commitment that you made in addition to the commitment that was made by staff. I've had a little preview of this, and I think y'all did some pretty extraordinary work. Katie.
Thank you. Moving on, I'd like to do a little bit of an education for you on what we call our regional partners. We went through several presentations with both our council and our citizen task force, educating them on, everything from where their water comes from, but also these regional partners, recognizing that any project that we would pursue for future water supplies includes at least one, if not multiple, of these districts, whether they're regulatory agencies or they're water providers. So I'd like to just give you a very Cliff Notes version of who each of these are and how they impact our water supplies. The first two are water providers to the city. The first one is Gulf Coast Water Authority. Each of these entities were created by the state legislature for various reasons, and Gulf Coast Water Authority was created in response to land subsidence in the Galveston County area, and their purpose is to provide water for industry, agriculture, and municipalities. And they take water from the Brazos River, and they have a pump station both upstream as well as downstream of the city of Sugar Land on the river. They pump that water through a series of canals, including Oyster Creek is part of that system, all the way through Fort Bend, Brazoria to Galveston County. They are made up of and governed by a board of 10 members, and the city does have representation on that board. And like I said earlier, they are a water supplier for the city, and we have a water supply contract with them. I'll get into the details of some of those water supply contracts at a later presentation. The Brazos River Authority was also created by the state legislature, and similar to Gulf Coast Water, their purpose is to develop and distribute water supplies. They also do water and wastewater treatment. They operate our wastewater treatment facilities in Sugar Land. Their district boundaries are defined as the Brazos River Basin, which you can see kind of in that graphic. It does extend all the way across the state. It's quite a large river basin, includes not only the Brazos River, but also the tributaries and a number of reservoirs. Similar to GCWA, they also are governed by a board, and the city, or Fort Bend County, does have a representative on that board. And again, we do have a water supply contract also with the Brazos River Authority. One of the planning groups for our region is referred to as Region H, and the state of Texas is broken into 16 different regional planning groups. And for Fort Bend County and for our area, we fall under Region H. Their purpose is to support the planning of the state's water resources. And particularly for this plan, all the projects that we develop will roll into this regional plan. They have a water plan that's on a 5-year planning cycle. All of our projects will get incorporated into this region plan that then rolls up into a state plan. The next two agencies are regulatory agencies, state regulatory agency, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. Purpose is to protect public health. They are the keepers of the water and wastewater treatment plant permits. They also deal with water rights permits and a lot of the water quality protection. So the city deals with them on a daily basis with our permits and with the water quality efforts. And moving forward, any water supply projects that we look at will likely require permits with the TCEQ that they would be reviewing and approving. The next one is the Texas Water Development Board, and their purpose is to provide information, education, and support for planning for water supplies for the state. They are the entity that works with the regional water plans and the state water plan. And they also manage a financial program with low-interest loans and grant forgiveness for water supply projects. So similar to the Region H, all of our projects that we would propose would roll into that regional plan and would be open to the financial programs that they offer. And the last agency that I'll talk about this evening is a local regulatory agency, and that's the Fort Bend Subsidence District. They were created in the late 1980s, as a conservation and reclamation district. Their purpose is to provide for, or to minimize and prevent land subsidence. So as our Fort Bend region and the Houston region in general historically has provided groundwater for meeting water demands for our communities. And as we continue to rely on those groundwater supplies because of the geologic structure, the soils and the ground beneath us and the aquifer structure, as we pull more and more water out of that structure, we see impacts to that at the surface and refer to that as land subsidence. It can create potential flooding issues, and parts of Houston have seen significant problems. Fort Bend was trying to learn from those mistakes, and the subsidence district was created to minimize that land subsidence, and they do that through the regulation of our groundwater supplies. Again, they are represented by a board, and the city does have representation on that board. To minimize and prevent land subsidence, the subsidence district has a regulatory plan, and in 2014, that plan required all of the cities within Area A, which Sugar Land falls into, to no longer rely solely on groundwater. 30% of our demands have to be supplied by non-groundwater or alternative supplies. In 2025, that regulatory plan will increase, and 60% of our demand has to be met by non-groundwater supplies. Should the city choose not to meet those regulations, there is a financial penalty Currently, the disincentive fee is set at $6.50 per 1,000 gallons. So if you compare that to your water bill, it's a significant financial penalty for not meeting these regulations. In 2014, the city chose to solve or to meet these regulations through a groundwater reduction plan. The city submitted that to the subsidence district, and it was approved in 2008. It outlines all of our strategies for meeting these groundwater regulations. And one thing that the subsidence district allows is for partnerships in these programs. So the city partnered with 17 other entities within well owners within both our city limits and our extraterritorial jurisdiction. So we have a total of 70 wells that are all combined into our groundwater reduction plan. The city is the administrator for that plan. We own and operate the infrastructure for meeting these groundwater regulations, which currently is our surface water treatment plant. We submit all the annual reports. And I also want to recognize that all the participants for the program, including the city, pays a pumpage fee for any groundwater that we do use. And that fee goes into the system utility fund, which is used to pay all of the costs associated with meeting these regulations. I won't touch on each of these participants, but these are the 18 participants for our groundwater reduction plan. They include not only the City of Sugar Land's potable public water system, but also includes private businesses, golf courses who have private wells. It also includes many of our HOAs and property owner associations, each of which have their own private well, but those wells are all metered, and they pay, as a participant in the program, they pay a pumpage fee related to that volume. And through that, they receive they meet the regulations as a whole. We meet the regulations for the subsidence district. This graphic shows the historic demand for our groundwater reduction program. Again, this is not just the city demands, but also all of those participants. And it shows it graphically, demand as a broken out by the water supply that meets that demand. So you can see in blue is the demand that that is met through groundwater wells. Green, it represents the surface water supplies, and purple represents reclaimed water. And prior to 2014 and prior to those regulations, you can see that more than 90% of our demands in the city were met through groundwater wells. And then with those regulations from the subsidence district going into effect in 2014, the city constructed and completed the surface water treatment plant that has a capacity of approximately 10 million gallons per day to meet those regulations. So you can see the jump in green in 2014 where we meet and actually exceed those regulations. Moving forward into the future, this graphic now shows both the planning horizons of 2025 and 2040. In 2025, the regulatory plan will increase, and 60% of our demand has to be met by non-groundwater supplies. So you can see the jump in the black dash line and how the goal for the city and for our groundwater reduction program would be for the green and purple to stay above that black line. So the city is faced with a task, is faced with the goal of meeting these increasing regulations. And really the driver for this planning effort was how do we meet those regulations? There are a number of different projects that we could do, different things that we could do to meet those regulations, but how do we evaluate each of those projects in a holistic manner, in a comprehensive manner, and come up with the best solution not only for meeting these regulations, but also for meeting our community's expectations and goals with regards to our future water supplies. Traditionally, when we look at planning for future water supplies, the traditional approach would be to look at the cost of the supply, of the new supply, and how much water you would get. It would be a purely financial analysis. And as we were trying to wrap our heads around what success looks like for the city in meeting these regulations, we recognized that we needed a much more comprehensive approach, and through that, an integrated approach. And what this integrated approach, what an integrated water resource plan allows us to do is to incorporate our community's vision. When we talk about future water supplies, what is important to our community, to our residents when we talk about future water supplies. Also allows us to incorporate the stakeholder participation through our task forces and to get receive their feedback throughout the process. It allows us to this integrated approach allows us to not only look at capital improvement projects like expanding the surface water plant, but also to consider policies and best management practices for future water supplies. By incorporating those three things, we feel like it's a much more comprehensive process for evaluating supplies for our future needs. It also, when we talk about water supplies, really the whole country talks much more about diverging from that just cost yield discussion and talks a lot about reliability and risk associated with water supplies. So while it may be a cheap supply, an easy solution, is it going to be there when you need it? When you're in drought conditions, what are the reliabilities and the risk associated with water supplies? This process also opens us up to innovation and to be able to think about out-of-the-box ideas with regards to future water supplies. There's accountability and performance measures that get developed to make sure that we're able to track how well we're meeting that community vision. By incorporating, again, that community, the stakeholder participation, and doing this very comprehensive process, we give our community assurance that we're really looking at water supplies that best meet our community's needs for the future. I think all of that really boils down to the Sugar Land Way, that we exceed expectations, that we're constantly looking for new opportunities and looking for the best solution for our residents. I'm going to go back and briefly talk about the project structure and also recognize that in addition to the council and our citizen task force, we had some consultants that helped us through this process. We had a number of studies. Carollo engineers helped us understand our water supply, our current water supplies, so that we could better plan for our future needs. We needed to understand more details about each of our current contracts, as well as the water right that the city holds on Oyster Creek. So they did some in-depth modeling analysis of Oyster Creek and how the operation of Oyster Creek might impact the reliability of those supplies. KIT professionals helped us really understand the reclaimed water potential in our community, what demands are out there for, who are the users, the end users who could use reclaimed water, which is taking wastewater effluent from our treatment plants, treating it to an even higher quality so that it can be used for filling amenity lakes and irrigating. So not only who are those customers, but then also matching those customers with potential reclaimed supplies. CDM Smith helped us really through the nuts and bolts of the integrated water resource plan, the technical aspects of building a decision support model, and they've done these type of plans throughout the country and are really the leaders in this type of plan. And then Black & Veatch over the past couple years has helped the city complete several water loss audits, understanding where we have water loss within our distribution system through leaks and breaks, as well as meter inaccuracies. And they also completed an AMI feasibility study that full information was used in this report. So this graphic is really a roadmap for developing an integrated water resource plan. And I'm going to come back to this graphic multiple times throughout the next couple presentations and specifically talk about each of these tasks and how the city has completed each of these tasks and some of the details of that. I'll point out that there are two boxes, a red box and a blue box. The blue box references the why, so that's a lot of the presentation this evening. Why is the city doing a water supply planning effort? Why are water supplies important to the city? What are those kind of high-level goals and community vision for water supplies? And then the second box in red is the how, and that lays out the various water supply projects, policies, and management strategies to meet those future needs. So that's looking at the capital improvement projects like expanding our surface water plant or additional water loss control within our operation system. That is the individual projects. Those two paths come together through our water system model. I'll also refer to that as our decision support model. So that's a comprehensive model that really models a drop of water throughout our system, from where it starts with our water supply contracts, how it gets pooled into our surface water plant, how it gets distributed, the capacities of each of our facilities, where our demands are, which demands it goes to, all the way through the end of our process with our wastewater treatment plants and return to the river. So that model kind of marries models our entire system, and it also allows us to incorporate the planning objectives and the planning options through a multi-step analysis of evaluating these different groups of projects and how well they meet each of those needs for our community. The focus for this evening is to talk about the why, the blue box, and the objectives. I'll start out with, again, I think the simplest definition for the objectives is why. So these are broadly stated vision and goals for the community. This is where it gives our community and our stakeholders an opportunity to tell the city what's important when we talk about water supplies. Is it more important for these supplies to be reliable, or is it more important for them to be the most cost effective? And through defining these objectives, that drives then the evaluation process. The objectives need to be distinctive, measurable, and concise, and we developed the objectives for our community using city management and council task force input through a list of questions. So over the past probably over 6 years, since the surface water plant came online and the city started thinking about the next regulatory phase, we had this list of questions that just kept growing and growing. And things like we were able to group these questions into 8 major categories. Questions surrounding how do we meet our current and future water demands, which included questions about how do we quantify our future demands, how much water do we have, how do we have too much, do we not have enough, talking about reliability and risk, what is the reliability of those supplies. So we had a number of questions that we needed to answer, grouped by these kind of major themes, these major questions. They kind of guided us towards developing the 7 objectives that we came up with. These objectives include optimizing our water resources. I will say there's a definition associated with each of these objectives, but I'll kind of summarize them briefly this evening. Optimizing our water resources, which, looking into the future, the city wants to ensure that we're using the right water for the right use, as well as using the water supply contracts that we have in the most efficient manner, that we're really optimizing those supplies. Using the right water for the right use includes things like making sure that we don't take treated water and put that in an amenity lake. That's not the right use for that water. it's been treated, it costs a lot of money to treat that and distribute that water. Maybe there's an alternative supply that's more appropriate for that amenity lake or for irrigating. The second objective is to provide a reliable water supply. Reliability focusing on what are these supplies, how reliable are these supplies when we're in drought conditions? What is the risk associated with each of our supplies? Objective 3 is to develop cost-effective solutions, and this one is important. Traditionally, this would be the only factor that you would consider in water supply planning. How much does it cost? How much water do you get? And while it's still important and still a piece of this planning process, it's not the only piece anymore. There's these other objectives. Promoting system efficiency is also important to the city. Any way that we can minimize losses within our system is water that we can then provide to another user. Promoting equity, this one focuses on ensuring that any solution that we have really benefits our community as a whole. Protecting the environment, recognizing that Oyster Creek and the environment in Sugar Land is very important to our residents. And then the last one is maintain quality of life. And this one really touches on the recognition that our residents are part of Sugar Land. They chose to move to Sugar Land because of the amenities that we offer them, because of the parks, because of the green space, because of the lakes. And so this objective really gets to ensuring that we continue to place a priority on those amenities. With that, I'm going to offer the podium back to Tricia. I just want to, she's going to walk through weighting these objectives. So while we've identified the 7 objectives, they're not all equal in our community's eyes. So we went through and relied on our citizen task force to tell us how important each of these objectives are.
So the program for the Citizen Task Force, it began the first 6 months, was about education and discussion about the existing water supply, water resources, water rights. We learned about the regional water partners such as the Fort Bend Subsidence District, the Brazos River Authority, MUDS, LIDS. We went through that education component. After that, then we began our exercise in weighting the objectives. So the first exercise was a dot exercise. This was a group task where each member they had a sheet of paper with the 7 objectives. They had dots. They went out of the room for the objective that they thought was the most important or should weigh the most. They put more dots on that sheet of paper. And they continued on till the least that they thought was the smallest objective, I guess. They put 1 dot, so to say. The forced pair was the second exercise, and this was more of an individual exercise where each member directly compared each objective to each other, and the results were compared just to make sure that it was kind of consistent, right? And let's see, we take a look at the results. The task force members, they ranked reliability as the highest at 25%. There's a tie at second place for the optimization of water resources and system efficiency at 18%. And third was cost efficiency at a weight of 15%. So the results were interesting. It wasn't what I expected. Typically, when choosing projects, it's driven by cost, right? But I think this task force selected and ranked objectives that they felt were best for the community, which is a value found in an integrated planning approach. I'll turn it back over to Katie.
Yes, so like Tricia said, this was one of the major roles for our Citizen Task Force, is to tell us how important are these objectives for our community. And these weights play directly into the evaluation process for looking at future supplies and how well they meet our community's needs. The last thing that I'll talk about this evening is the performance measures. So I recognize this table is a little bit hard to read, but I wanted to touch on that while we have these objectives for our communities, these high-level goals, and our community vision, we have to be able to take that and measure how well we're meeting those goals, and we do that through the development of these performance measures. So for example, optimizing our water resources, we evaluated that through 2 performance measures. One being the percent of non-drinking water demands met with non-drinking water supplies. So how well are we using the right water for the right use? And then the second one was percent utilization of our surface water contracts. So that one focused on recognizing that we pay for these surface water supply contracts. Are we fully utilizing them? So these 2 performance measures are outputs of our decision support model that we can really put hard numbers to an objective that's kind of a high-level vision. So it's a way to put some concrete numbers to our objectives. We did have some performance measures that the model, it was not an output of the model, it was more of a qualitative score. For example, promoting system efficiency, we have a qualitative score for operational complexities. So does this new project, this new water supply, does it add, on a score from 1 to 5, is it adding a lot of operational complexities for our utility? Is it going to be an efficient use of our system? Are we going to constantly be flushing for water quality problems, or just does it really strain the operations of our water supply? So with that, kind of I'll preview the workshop 2. Next week, I will be coming back to you and focusing on the question how. And this question will also be multiple parts. How much water are we looking for, which is what we did a gap analysis for. And how do we meet those needs? So this is looking at 15 different projects that the city evaluated in great detail, future water supply projects and policies and programs for meeting these needs. And then how do we evaluate these projects through the water system model and the decision support model? And then the last workshop number 3, I will be focusing on the question what. And so this will be talking about what we learned from the analysis process, the multiple hybrid analysis that we completed, and talking about the recommendations from that process, what groups of projects best meet our community's needs, and the implementation plan. So with that, I hope that I was able to answer the 3 why questions for you. Why is the city undergoing a water supply plan? That we have these subsidence district regulations restricting how much groundwater we can use in the future. Why we chose an integrated approach versus the traditional approach, that it allows us to incorporate our community's vision for water supplies into the future. And it's a very comprehensive process. And lastly, the why, defining those community objectives. And I'll open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Katie.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, Steve, I was going to go to you. So
yeah. Sorry, Katie. I was thinking it was going to be in the next session. So I guess I'm primarily talking to my colleagues here. You now have an understanding of all the interlocking agencies that drive a lot of our decisions. It's complicated. With 1,100 people a day still coming to Texas, and we're not making any more water anywhere, it's going to get more expensive, and more people competing with the same resource. We've seen over the last 2 or 3, 4 years that our primary supplier of surface water has raised our rates almost every year, and not by single digits. I guess most people, they just want the best quality at the least price, and I want it every time I turn on my faucet. As you can see, it's a very complicated thing. Back when we had the big drought, it became clear that the Brazos River Authority may be oversubscribed. There are people in the north part of the Brazos River Basin that want their recreational lakes filled. There are municipalities up and down the Brazos River that would like to provide drinking water to their cities, and then there are big businesses like Dow that need water to keep their employees doing what they're doing. So we're also dealing with unfunded mandates coming from these regulatory agencies. As you know, we've probably already spent $100 million on the first wave. We're looking at potentially another giant amount of money that's unfunded from the state, requiring us to meet the 60%. I think the staff is doing a great job of anticipating what's coming and trying to keep the city in the best shape it can. When they went out looking for other cities that have done this, there weren't any. So, I mean, this is pioneering work being done by our staff, and both Hamesh and I were very pleased with that. They're doing this now rather than waiting until we get into a big problem. As you can see from what Tricia had to say, by the way, she did a good job, thank you, and the other members of the Citizen Committee. There's an awful lot of policy issues in this area. They are going to not non-trivially impact our residents. So it was really important to bring in citizen input. What were their priorities? And they did a great job. That was our assessment, was that the staff led them through a process where they got to choose what they thought was more important than not. And sometimes it was surprising, but that's our residents. That's what they want. And so we use their input. So I think we'll have, after all this is over, we'll still have a fair amount of policy questions to deal with, but we'll have an awful lot of good input and analysis to deal with it. Thank you.
Before I go to questions, Tricia, is there anything that you'd like to say and kind of before we go to staff questions? Anything you'd like to add to what you've already said?
No, I thought that was a great summary of the water issues that we're dealing with in Texas. And yeah, kudos to City of Sugar Land for being forward-thinking and supporting this initiative.
Thanks, Tricia. Okay, clarifying questions for staff. Amy?
Question per se, but Tricia, we know who you are, and you did a phenomenal job speaking on behalf of everybody, and we acknowledge the city council members individually who served, but I don't know the names, and I'd like the public to know the names of the other people who served on this board, because they spent a lot of time. So it's kind of clarifying just who are the people. I think we should acknowledge them and publicly thank them, not just as a broad group, but by acknowledging their names as well.
Absolutely. This plan is, the schedule is to bring the plan for approval on March 19th, and at which point we'd like to, and have asked for all of our citizen task force members to be present at that meeting so that they can be recognized.
Okay,
and we can certainly provide a list of their names.
I just thought we could on the record right now, since we've had somebody speak on their behalf, and Tricia did a great job, and we have two of them here. I'm not even sure of their names, and so.
Right. We have 14 of them, so I'm afraid that I'm going to miss some names, but I can certainly take a stab if.
Tricia, do you know all their names?
She's looking through the manual right now.
We did have a roster.
Yeah. There we go. Well, next workshop is the.
There you go.
So
yes.
This is
So Tricia Frederick was our chair person. Jim Goldman was our vice chair. Ruth Barrett, Michaela Lim, Bruce Lowry, Ann DeStefano, Chuck Huell, Showery, Nandajiri, Basir Pirzada, Leo Weinberg, Elizabeth Bryson, Poonam Mathur, Inyat Zarian, and Megan Ortiz.
Thank you, and I actually recognize some of those names,
Yes.
so when I see them, I can say that we acknowledge them. And thank you to all three of you, and please pass on our thanks to everybody. It is very well thought out, and Katie, you just did a great job explaining the why, and I think that it didn't leave many questions to be asked of you for clarification. It could not be clearer from my perspective.
Great, thank you.
Carol?
Katie, I'd just like to thank you and the rest of the staff for being very proactive on this. And Tricia, thank you to you and to everyone on the Integrated Water Task Force, the citizens who served on that. From what I've seen, it's very thorough, and I look forward to getting into the how. And my question is, now we're in the Subsidence District Area 1, where we have significant regulatory requirements. Now, in Area B, there aren't any regulatory requirements at this time. And so what's the reason for that?
There aren't currently any regulations for that area because there, if you consider where the large cities are and where a lot of the residents and the municipalities in Fort Bend County, they all fall within Area A. So the focus of the current regulatory plan is where that water demand, where those groundwater wells are.
Population density, Katie.
The right population density. So currently in Area B, there's not as much demand on the groundwater, although the Subsidence District does go, they do have a plan for updating that regulatory plan, and they will continue to watch population growth in that area, and should they see fit, they would start to regulate the groundwater in that area.
Most of the land's agricultural.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Katie. Tricia, thank you all for coming tonight. Bridget, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank the city for being so proactive. I've worried about water for many years because I know it's finite, and I know there's going to be issues moving forward with us even getting the amount of water we need due to the surface water rules. And so I think that we have to think of every way possible to be able to provide all the water needs of our citizens, and I think this is a great step to start doing that. So I want to thank our city manager and the city.
Item number 9, 9A, City Council member reports. Jennifer, let's start with you.
Okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to Fort Bend County Day.
There we go.
And what I've been doing is going out and meeting everybody who's stepping up to run for office and to be leaders in our cities, school boards, and county.
Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with council members Young and Lane, we attended Houston Galveston Area Council awards presentation for our Parks Department. They won actually 2 awards. One for the work they're doing on their master plan, and one for Mayfield Park. We've got a great Parks Department. We need to fund them more. Secondly, been to a couple of HOA meetings. One, Sugar Lakes and Imperial were a couple of examples. And finally, I'll mention meeting with the principal of the lower division of Harmony Schools just to check how we're doing. And I think the concerns have dropped off, and they're working very hard to be considerate and good neighbors of our residents up in that area.
Thank you, Steve. Carol.
I attended the Boots and Badges fundraiser at the George Ranch Historical Park, which was a fundraiser for Behind the Badge, benefiting law enforcement officials in Fort Bend County. And the mayor and I attended the Avalon HOA Lunar New Year celebration. And that was a lot of fun, and the performances were really, really good. The First Lady was also there. And I also attended the Men Who Cook fundraiser, which is benefiting the Lamar Educational Awards Foundation, which provides extra programming for Lamar CISD.
Thank you, Carol. Amy.
I had the privilege, Stuart Jacobson, can you please stand up? This is my successor. And I had the privilege of introducing him. He's unopposed in the election. I could not be happier, and there's not a better person who could be running for the position, who is now the, I guess, council member-elect, since you have no opponent. So that was very exciting, and it truly was a privilege to introduce him, and a surprise, since I was the pinch hitter. I also attended Councilmember McCutcheon's kickoff, and it was very well attended. It was a lovely event, and again, I had the privilege of talking about what a pleasure it's been working with you as well, and it truly has. Went to Andy Meyer's breakfast, and that was very informative. And then finally, I also went to Men Who Cook. It was a great event, and if you haven't been there, and I think, Jennifer, you were there too, weren't you? It's worth going to. It's so much fun, great food for a great cause. That's it.
Just kind of a point of order so that everybody's clear. We should stay away from politics on the dais. So if we can speak about the business, speak about events that we've attended, but I'd ask that we stay away from the fundraisers. Bridget.
Most of mine have been already covered, but I did want to thank Steve Porter for attending Sugar Lakes HOA, because that will be part of District 1 after the elections, and Jennifer Lane also attended that HOA meeting. And I, too, will be traveling to Austin tomorrow for Fort Bend County Day, and hopefully being able to talk to some of our representatives on some of the issues facing our city.
Yeah, and I want to thank those of you that are attending Fort Bend County days. I will tell you, I attended a wonderful luncheon with the governor today, and the governor is ready to take on the mayors and the counties and everybody else that gets in the way of his agenda. So I will tell you that this will be a rock'em sock'em legislative session, and we should be prepared to do battle with the governor and the lieutenant governor and anybody else, because they are blaming the cities and the counties for their lack of being willing to fund public education and reduce taxes. So let's get with it. That's all I have. Alan?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Remind everyone that we'll be hosting the annual State of the City presentation next Thursday, February 28th at the Fort Bend Marriott. And you can register online at the Fort Bend Chamber website for your participation. Also, Mayor, I would like to thank all of the members of the City Council for your tolerance and patience as I've been absent due to health issues. I would also like to recognize the tremendous work of this organization, because it looks to me like there hasn't been a step missed in my absence. And although there may be some people that'd be worried about that, I couldn't be any more proud. So thank all of our staff.
Yeah,
thank
Mr.
you very
Beat,
much.
Alan.
Fantastic.
Daphne, you won the bet. It's not quite 7:30. I had it at 7, but you're closer. Motion to adjourn.